often become a major decider in political campaigns and is a dividing line among voters in the U.S. In his new documentary, The Gift of Life, Governor Mike Huckabee gives a more personal look at abortion and the debate of when life begins. And he reveals the incredible story of one little girl that can only be described as miraculous.
While campaigning in the Seattle, Washington area in the fall of 2007, I met a supporter who approached me at the conclusion of an event. That woman was Maria Lancaster.
And I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "I am sorry, but I must tell you this story. I'm compelled." And I took my daughter's picture out and I said, "I want you to meet this child. She was adopted as a frozen embryo and was in the freezer for 4 years at 2 cells. And her name's Alicia. She's my daughter, and my husband and I adopted her, and you need to know this."
Jeff and Maria Lancaster had wanted to start a family for years without success. But even after repeated miscarriages, Maria never lost hope.
I did believe in my heart that this baby was coming, and so I went and bought a cradle, and I told my husband, somehow, I don't know how, but that crib will be full.
One day, Jeff learned about embryo adoption, where surplus embryos from another couple's fertility treatments are harvested and then frozen.
How it works is if a family creates embryos and they have finished building their family and they still have remaining embryos in the freezer, they have 4 choices. They can continue to freeze them indefinitely, they can discard them, they can make them available for stem cell research, or they can make them available for another couple.
Alicia Lancaster, now 8 years old, was the miraculous result. At the time, there were less than a dozen children born in the U.S. in this manner.
And it's amazing that that can actually be done, because it just is incomprehensible that something can be frozen for years, still be alive, and be in suspended animation. And yet you thaw it out and the life begins to grow just as it would have in the womb naturally. I always believed that, the 9th grade biology book said life begins at conception, and I'm in 9th grade. I thought I'll go with that, and I've never really changed from that position. But when you see the picture of your daughter underneath a microscope as a 2-cell little being, and then when I gave birth to her and held her in my arms, and she looked into my eyes and said to me, "You're my mother, and I love you," it makes the gravity and the meaning of what a human embryo is, it drives it home.
Another incredible story that most people will never hear.
This was a life-changing thing. I still get emotional
about
it. Yeah. And by the way, I still have the picture of Alicia in my wallet. I've kept it there for over 4 years since I first met her. But here's the power of this story. Here is a frozen embryo. For 4 years, it's frozen. It's taken out, placed in Maria, and she gives birth to a human being. When people say, well, it doesn't matter if we experiment with frozen embryos because it's not really a life. I've held little Alicia in my arms. I'm telling you, it's a real person. It's not just tissue. It's not just fodder for medical experimentation. This is the great miracle of God. How anyone could even meet Alicia and not believe that God is the author of life. I think it takes a greater quantum leap of faith into the abyss of disbelief than it does to believe that God created life.
And here God was preserving this little girl until he had a safe place to plant her in her mother's womb.
Do we have any idea how many frozen embryos there are out there?
There are hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of frozen embryos, but there's only been a few dozen where the people have actually placed them. Alicia, at the time she was born, was one of only about a dozen. And now 4 years later, there are several more. But one of the things that her mother, Maria, is doing is helping people to understand that this is a possibility for many people who have struggled to have children.
Right. Oh,
and life-changing because so many people have wanted to have children and can't. but there are frozen embryos available just like that of Alicia.
Wow.
That's miraculous.
That is amazing. So, you know, the tide of this generation is turning in understanding about the issue of the gift of life. Talk a little bit about that.